Camille was a smart country girl who dreamed of a big city, a good education, and a career. But circumstances were against her. Camille was born into a simple rural family. Her dad, Christopher, was a paramedic on the local farm. Her mom, Nancy, worked as a letter carrier. The village of Barton was small, though picturesque. There was a winding river. There was a deciduous forest nearby. Many houses with carved plate-bands have been preserved in the settlement. It was a pity that many of them stood abandoned. Old people were dying, and young people scattered to the big cities. The work of W. Barton was not much. The main place was a farm. It belonged to a large businessman who owned a network of cattle breeding complexes in the south of Russia. He personally looked into Wagtopa very rarely, although he sometimes made visits. When press tours for journalists were organized to show that the cows were kept clean. There was also a school, a kindergarten, a medical center, and a post office in the village. That's all. Camille has had dreams since childhood of leaving Barton for Kiev. Megapolis becomes a big boss in the beauty industry, works in a skyscraper, drives a cool car, and goes to restaurants. But she's his. She rode only on a bicycle, and sometimes with her father on his old Lada in the city. And instead of restaurants, she had a school canteen. The girl was distinguished by her intelligence and cleverness, was an excellent student at school, liked everyone. For her malleability, she was loved by teachers and peers. Conflicts between them occurred very rarely, only if Camille voiced aloud her dreams of a successful career in the city, and her aloud ridiculed. At such times, the girl fearlessly gave the offenders a rebuff and declared that she will succeed. But a king has been found. Let's see if T.D. Barton will go far. The onions, the seeds, the peers spoke. They themselves made no big plans for the future. The limit of their dreams was to study at a vocational school in the district center, buy an apartment or a house without a current roof, and get a job on a farm, because the pay there was decent by local standards. I understood Camille's ambitions, but there were those who supported Camille and encouraged her. Among them was Molly, her age. The boy lived in the city, but came to the neighboring village to visit his grandmother for the summer. One day they saw Camille and a group of teenagers from different villages who were going to swim in the lake nearby. The girl immediately took a liking to this unlikable boy. He was calm, not fussily silent, and thoughtful. At the same time, he reeked of power. Thanks to this, he immediately earned authority among the locals. Camille was fascinated by Molly, as were many of the other girls. They hung around the city boy and openly picked on him. But Camille was too proud. She pretended that Molly was indifferent to her, although a real fire was raging in her chest at that time. Apparently, it was this feigned indifference that attracted the boy. "What are you reading?" He approached the girl as she sat under a tree reading a book. Other teenagers were buzzing about, noisy crowds splashing in the lake. "Salinger over the rye," in a monosyllabic voice, Camille replied. Her heart rolled frantically at that moment. "Excellent choice," praised Molly. "Did you read it?" Camille asked. "It's an iconic work. I'm surprised it's here." "Someone's reading it," replied the boy. "That sounds arrogant," said Camille. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. It's just that it's the first time I've seen a person with a book in our company." "And with one," Molly explained. "We're country people, but we're literate," Camille joked. "Yes, I understand. I apologize again if I offended you. I've been watching you for a long time." "Is there something special about you?" The guy answered. "Are you hitting on me?" Surprised, asked the girl, who was wildly pleased to hear this from the guy she sympathized with. No, why not?" "I was confused," Molly answered and smiled embarrassedly. As the popular song goes, "Don't be embarrassed," Camille said, and was surprised at her boldness. "What do you say?" The boy smiled. "You're from Barton, aren't you?" Yes. "Are you in?" Camille asked. "That's right," answered Molly. "I have a great aunt who lives there. I visit her during the vacations, but I'm from the city." "I see. What do your parents do for a living?" the girl asked. "Mom is a housewife and Dad is a businessman." The boy answered. "What kind of business does he run?" Camille persisted. "I don't really want to talk about it," Molly said. "As you like, I don't insist." The girl shrugged her shoulders and started reading the book again. "What do your parents do for a living?" The boy distracted her. My mom is a letter carrier and my dad is a veterinary paramedic at the local farm. Maybe you've heard of it? Camille asked. I have. Sure have. Molly replied and hurried to change the subject. Do you often come to this lake to swim? Alone? Never. Only if we go with friends. They're not scared here alone, the girl explained. I see. And sometimes I come alone just to get away from the hustle and bustle, Molly said. You sound like you're about 40 years old. By the way, how old are you? Camille asked. I'm 17, and you? Asked the boy. We're the same age. I'm 17 too, Camille smiled. Great. By the way, if you want to come here tomorrow at lunchtime, we'll go for a walk together, we'll swim, we'll discuss books. I understand you like to read, asked Molly. I do, said Camille. You sure don't see me. You don't have anything so bad on your mind. How could you think that? Insulted Molly. You can ask anyone around here. I have a great reputation. I'm a real gentleman, a 17-year-old gentleman. Sounds like fun, laughed Camille. Okay, I'll think about your offer. I'll meet you at the same place. Deal? Molly said cheerfully. Now let's go swimming. Because the guys are already looking at us funny, they'll think something wrong. They'll start rumors, and gossip spreads at the speed of light, answered Camille. She pulled off her sundress, remaining in her red swimsuit, and ran to the water. Watch out, I'll dive. Molly followed her and dived in too. Dropped out. He caught Camille's gaze. She smiled at him. The boy smiled back. Each of them looked forward to the next day. A doubt crept into the girl's mind whether she should go to the lake. The meeting with Molly was tantalizing, but it also held unseen dangers. She wanted to discuss it with someone, but there were no candidates. They weren't close with their parents, and they didn't talk about personal matters. Christopher and Nancy were conservative people, so they were against any romantic encounters. They believed that it was too early for their daughter to go on dates. When she graduates, she'll find herself a nice local boy. The main thing is that he should be a non-drinker and a hard worker. The girl couldn't talk about Molly with her friends because she was afraid of jealousy. The city boy was an enviable groom to whom many local girls made eyes. But he held his ground. In the end, Camille decided to go after conferring with herself. She told her parents that she was going out with her friends, put on her best sundress, let her hair down, and set off on her bicycle. From Barton to the lake was 2 kilometers, the same distance as from Blomfield, only on the other side. During the ride, the girl's heart was pounding frantically, and not just from the fact that she was pedaling very fast. Camille reached her destination 15 minutes ahead of schedule and decided to slow down a bit in the distance. There was a stereotype in her head that decent girls should be late, so she decided to hold off. Meanwhile, she could clearly see that Molly had already arrived and was walking back and forth picking wildflowers while waiting for her acquaintance. After waiting for 20 minutes, Camille walked towards the guy. I'm sorry I kept you waiting. Played like an actress the scene of Camille's meeting. That's okay, replied Molly and handed the girl a bouquet. This is for you, very sweetheart. Thank you, replied Camille. These were the first flowers that a guy had ever given her. The girl was proud and noticed that a blush appeared on Molly's cheeks. Shall we bathe first? Or first? The guy broke the awkward pause. I would bathe. It's a hot day, so it's a good time for that, Camille answered and started to pull off her sundress. Molly also began to undress. The girl saw how carefully he was looking at her at that moment. But she had nothing to be embarrassed about. She had a nice trim figure and a beautiful swimsuit. At the same time, Camille herself looked so that there were no acquaintances nearby and they were not noticed to avoid rumors. Fortunately, there were few people on the lake during the sun itself, and all of them were strangers. Folks would pull up to the beach closer to evening, when the heat would subside as well. Well, who's first? Camille asked, pointing to the water. Let's go together, Molly suggested. He firmly took the girl's hand and resolutely led her to the shore. They actually entered the water at the same time and started splashing merrily, then headed away from the shore. It turned out that both of them were excellent swimmers. In the middle of the lake, Camille lay on her back and froze on the water. She felt real bliss. I can't do that, Molly told her. You will. You just have to relax and let go as much as possible, and then everything will work out. Try it, advised Camille. Molly tried to follow the girl's recommendation, but he failed. He went down. Okay, I guess it's not my thing. I'm not in the habit of relaxing. My father says you have to keep your grip on yourself at all times and not slack off. Grip, he explained, upset the guy. But you have to be able to relax, Camille said. That's probably why I like to spend time in the countryside. There is no fuss, no hurry. It's a different rhythm. And my father doesn't torment me with constant activity like he does at home. Molly smiled. Ha, I'd love to do that. It's nice to be in such serenity for a month or two. And then you get tired of it. You want activity, but you can't find it in the village. Camille said sadly and dived in. Dive in. She heard Molly's question. You're not going to live here all your life, are you? Are you going to come to town after school? I want to, but I'm not sure I can. My parents want me to stay here. Marry some local guy, have kids, get a job, Camille said. Where do you work here? Molly wondered. On the farm. Where else is there money to be made? The boss pays well, said Camille. I'm Senko, the boy said and hurried to change the subject. And if you do manage to go to the city, what would you like to become? In general, I'm interested in beauty. I would like to become a hairdresser or a manicurist, but so unusual, which makes his work for a tick, and the most advanced, who follows the trends, and ideally open your own salon. Camille said dreamily. Aren't such workers needed here? You have to cut hair and do nails everywhere. Molly was surprised. What are you talking about? It's strange to compare. Here they do a maximum of brown hair and cut it to 0. Men also have nothing interesting with their nails. Camille said sadly. I understand why you want to work in beauty, because you are the most beautiful, Molly said and smiled. Was Camille reflected in Barton, Oregon and Blomfield? All over the world, answered Molly. He accelerated sharply and breaststroked to the shore, shouting to his buddy to catch up. At that moment, Camille felt as if she had grown wings. No one had ever said such words to her before, though she herself was well aware of her attractiveness. Blue eyes, long blonde hair, a slim figure like a ballerina. She stood out among the local girls, blood and milk, but her parents, on the contrary, were as if embarrassed by their daughter's aristocratic appearance and her differentness. And in whom did she come from? A peasant family? Father asked sometimes. Nancy kept silent at these moments, though her grandfather's stories about being the illegitimate son of a local shepherdess and a nobleman came to her mind. Her parents would have liked Camille to be as knocked down and strong as everyone else. And Christopher and Nancy generally thought that looks were the 10th thing. It's all about having a daughter, a worker. And the nose didn't hold up. Coming ashore, Camille noticed that a company of her acquaintances from Barton was approaching the lake. Let's get out of here. She hurried Molly and pulled on her sundress in a hurry. What's wrong? The boy asked in surprise. No time to explain, said Camille. Jumping on her bike and setting off, Molly hurriedly pulled on a t-shirt and hurried after her friend. Together they rode deeper into the forest. The forest coolness saved them from the heat and prying eyes. Kitchen. We're safe now, Camille exhaled. I get it. Are you afraid of gossip? Asked Molly. I'm not afraid of anything, shouted the girl. But I don't want any more trouble. Okay, said the boy. The young people got off their bikes and went for a walk. Camille was telling her friend about the plants that grow in the forest. She had known them since childhood. At this time, the girl was very enthusiastic and happy. She had always loved solitude, but sometimes she lacked a soulmate nearby, and she found one in Molly. He listened attentively to Camille, asked clarifying questions, joked and smiled. But why are we always talking about me? Tell me more about yourself. What do you dream of becoming? The girl asked. Molly answered, one syllable. A fashionable profession with money, smiled Camille. Yes, it is, but I'm not in it for that. I'm really interested, and I'm good at it. I even took part in Olympiads and won prizes, Molly said proudly. Very cool. Sincerely admired Camille. Your parents must be terribly proud of you? Not really, Molly blushed sharply. My mom's into herself. She has fitness, yoga, beauty salons. Dad's all about business, always traveling, business trips. He's rarely home. Sometimes it seems to me that we are randomly gathered under one roof, people who feel nothing for each other. Not exactly the best role model, Camille grinned. That's probably why you don't want a family at all. Why not? On the contrary, Molly declared, I just want to marry for love and build a family in a smart way, not like my father. He married my mom because she was the daughter of rich parents with a good inheritance. There were no feelings between them from the beginning. That's why the family was like that. No one really wants that, Camille said sadly. I don't know what to say to that. There's nothing to say, Molly said. He stopped, took Camille's hands in his, and looked into her eyes. Sometimes words are unnecessary. Then he kissed her in a way that made her eyes darken. I like you very much, he said, locking lips with Molly. Let's go out, let's go out. Instantly agreed Camille. The romance developed rapidly. In many ways, the guys were driven by the fact that they had little time. There was less than a month until the end of the vacation. Guy and girl tried very hard to hide their relationship from others, but it is not easy to do in the village. And soon about the affair, Camille and Molly knew almost all the locals, in particular, the parents of the girl. Father and mother were not delighted, but did not interfere with the daughter, which was very surprising. Nothing, let the girl walk, sang, let out. All the same, this signal in a couple of weeks already smells to his city, and she will forget it as a drink, reasoned Christopher. Molly really left after 14 days after a series of romantic walks, swimming in the river and lake, dozens of bouquets of wildflowers. At parting, Camille even stumbled a little, but the guy hurried to comfort her. Don't be sad, sweetheart. Everything will be all right. We'll see each other again. I'll come during the fall break, and then, a year later, when we finish school, you'll come to town, and no one will stop us from being together. Camille smiled and clung to her fiancé. Okay, I believe you. Let it be so. Autumn had come. The bright country summer was replaced by gray, dull days. Camille was sad and missed Molly very much. He called and texted her all the time, but this was no substitute for live communication. The fall vacations began. But the guy did not come. He told her that he was skateboarding. I landed and broke my leg. Do you want to come to my town? He offered Camille. What are you saying? My parents won't let me go. And where would we live? The girl was surprised. That's right too, Molly wisely reasoned. A new series of expectations for the winter vacation began. But Molly didn't come again. Look, it's not my fault. There's a programming Olympiad in China right now. I have to go. You remember how important this is to me. If we win, I'll get a ticket to life. The guy enthusiastically told her into the phone. This time, however, he was met by Camille's indifferent silence. She had less and less faith in the groom. In addition, her friends viciously convinced her that he just played with her in the summer and left her. He had plenty of other girls in town who were no match for Camille. Parents said pretty much the same thing, just in slightly different words. Eventually, the girl believed these beliefs and announced to Molly that they were breaking up. He resisted and told her not to listen to envious people, that they would definitely be together. It is only necessary to be patient. But the girl was adamant. She regarded Molly's behavior as a betrayal and did not want to hear more about him. Distracted from the first love helped to prepare for the final exams. This process took a lot of time and effort. Camille still did not give up hope to enter a university and go to the city. There she would go to a hairdressing course and fulfill her dream. As a result, she got the highest scores among her classmates. These results quite allowed her to pass on the budget, but her parents were categorically against it. No city, no university. You've already used a city major, and there's tons of them out there. I'm worried about you, silly. Stay here, go to the local technical school in the district center, and you study. And then we'll see, my father said like a cutoff. Besides, the mother has become a bad TV. You'll see, they'll give you disability. What will we live on? How will we manage the household? We have chickens, a vegetable garden. Who's going to help if you're our only child? Camille had no choice but to submit to her parents' will. She cried into her pillow for several nights, but then she obeyed fate and enrolled in the local agrarian technical school to become a veterinary paramedic. She decided to follow in her father's footsteps. It's the exact opposite of what I dreamed of. Raised a girl. Her classmates were good people, but she had absolutely nothing to talk to them about. She was interested in literature, art house movies, and Western music. Her classmates didn't read books at all, watched stupid comedies, and listened to vulgar love songs or meaningless Russian rap. The girl immersed herself in her studies. If life left her no choice, it means that it is necessary to become a really good specialist. She listened attentively to teachers, showed diligence in practice. In the evenings in the fall, she helped her parents on the plot, and in the winter, when the household chores were less and there was nowhere to entertain, locked herself in her room and read books. She never got over Molly at night. Sometimes she would revisit their photos together, reread the tenderness-filled correspondence, and cry. Sometimes she'd even break through to call her ex-boyfriend, but something would stop her at the last moment. Neither he nor she actively maintained social networks, did not post personal photos, so they could not follow the events of each other's lives. In the spring, Camille realized that it was necessary to give at least one of her numerous suitors a chance. She agreed to go on a date with a classmate. He seemed to her quite handsome and not the most stupid, so he stood out favorably against the others. The guy invited Camille to go for a ride in a car and then sit in the only cafe in the district center. She agreed. In the salon, he loudly turned on Russian rap music. The girl didn't like it immediately, as well as the fact that the suitor was chewing gum. In addition, he one after another gave out stupid, vulgar jokes. On the way to the cafe, Camille realized that she had agreed to this rendezvous for nothing. She told the guy that she had a headache and asked him to take her home. But how? You know right now in a minute, yes more. The young man rolled down his window and spit out his gum with relish. Back home, Camille cried. I wish I hadn't gone out at all. Otherwise I would disappoint you men completely, she said to herself. That evening she decided to call Molly. With trembling fingers, she dialed his number. Her heart raced. She waited to hear her favorite voice, but heard only a mechanical answering machine. The subscriber's machine was switched off or out of range. But then, so be it, Camille said with a sad smile and threw the phone away. That night she decided that she no longer believed in love and would never look for it again. She realized that the best option was to become the girl she deep down despised, the one who views men as moneybags and scowls at them, sits on their necks, and lives beautifully at someone else's expense. The decision was a painful one. Camille was well aware that she was making it out of anger and resentment, but she did not want to change anything. However, the problem was that there were no such men in her surroundings, and to look for them in Barton Keller District Center would be foolish. But the girl did not despair. She decided that she would fulfill her parents' will and get an education in the village, but when she got a diploma, she would fulfill her long-standing dream and move to the city. There she was going to get a job in an elite veterinary clinic and treat pedigree cats and dogs of rich owners. If she could find a suitable candidate for her heart with a fat purse. Camille did not share her thoughts with anyone, but her demeanor had changed markedly. She became more aloof, cold, and even arrogant. Her parents didn't pay much attention to it. Between them there had never been a warm, trusting relationship. The daughter continued to help them in the household and diligently studied. That was enough for them, to understand her mood swings, her mental worries. They had no intention of dealing with her mood swings. Meanwhile, Camille decided to start training what they thought were men. It was a skill that would come in handy in the future. She didn't even consider peers. Her first target was the owner of a plumbing store in the district center of John, a local rich man. By the standards of the girl, he was not so old, only 36 years old, handsome enough, and most importantly, well-to-do. After classes at the technical school, Camille now and then began to visit the store under the pretext that her parents are going to make repairs in the bathroom. And she allegedly, at their request, to look for the necessary goods and price. In fact, there was no question of any renovation. Just John himself often consulted buyers, and it was a great excuse to get acquainted with him. The girl was pussyfooting around, asking stupid questions about the guards and flapping her eyelashes expressively. John could not help but give in. He was fascinated by Camille. But because he was a groupie by nature, he didn't want to be. The son didn't know how to approach the girl, so he did what he knew how to do. First, he gave the girl the most expensive faucet in his store. Here you go, Camille, this one's a present. It's a great faucet with a nose and no nose. Your parents will appreciate it. You don't have to pay, it's a gift from the house. John said, blushing. Camille accepted the gift and acted delighted, although she was horrified to think what she would do with this thing. The way out was found quickly. The girl resold the faucet over the internet, getting a decent sum for it. John did not cheat. The faucet was indeed expensive. Step by step I frowned. John definitively did. When Camille was a sophomore in high school, they began dating. By New Year's Eve, John proposed to his sweetheart that she move in with him. The man had a nice house in the neighborhood center. Camille informed her parents about it. Rick was proud. One of the local rich men was interested in his daughter, but he didn't agree right away. "I wish you'd get married, but it's not very human. You're all so young and precocious." But John is a solid, serious man. "I trust him. And he's looking at you with loving eyes, hoping to marry you in the summer." "All right, I'll let you move in with him, but on one condition: that you don't forget us, that you come and help out on weekends," I said. Sure. Daddy, thank you for that." Camille smiled. She wasn't really going to be traveling to Barton that often, so she talked John into fixing up the bathroom in her parents' house. He agreed. The parents were pleased and stopped demanding frequent visits from their daughter. John and Camille lived together for the rest of the winter and spring. They had a good time. The man idolized his chosen one and was really going to propose to her. She did not have romantic feelings for her roommate, but she had respect for him. Camille was not going to marry John. For her, it was a test option, very convenient, before she graduated from technical school. However, Camille had to return to Wagtop for the summer, and the girl was sent to the local farm. It was not easy to get there. The place was considered good. Besides, the students were paid well for their work, so only the best students were sent there. At first, the girl was upset, but then she looked at the situation from a different angle. She would earn money and become more independent. Besides, she would get a break from John, whose worries seemed more and more intrusive. "You don't have a job yet?" "Your first job?" Miranda asked her in a protective voice. Camille nodded silently. "Well, it's a start, I guess. Your first entry will be doyarka. That's real in Russia," the woman said, noticing how the student looked. "It's only an entry in the book, but in reality, everything is very modern. We have a lot of equipment, everything is clean, sterile, and the work is even honorable." Camille didn't answer her, but she didn't change her opinion about the not the most pleasant entries in her work record. But she didn't have to choose. She coped with her work with dignity, without disliking or disgusting the cows. She carried out all the instructions purely mechanically, and she was good at it. In July, the owner, Stephen Barnett, came to the farm to inspect it. The man was in his early 40s. He was in great shape and had a flamboyant charisma. "That's the kind of man I'd like to see in the future," Camille said to herself. During his rounds, which were conducted for him by Miranda, Stephen smiled at the staff and 32 long teeth, was friendly and joked a lot. "And this is our intern. Camille has been working for us for the second month, showing progress," the woman said, walking up to Camille's workstation. She knew that the owner would come to the farm today, so she did her trademark makeup, which did not make anyone indifferent. "Good afternoon. I've heard good things about you. Nice to meet you, sweetheart." The girl smiled and fluttered her eyelashes. "Nice to meet you." Stephen smiled even wider. "Well, as long as they show outstanding results, why not give awards, Miranda?" "What do you say, Stephen?" The woman laughed slightly, for the first time encountering such generosity of her host. "That's what I say. I say give a prize to a young talent," he said cheerfully, noticing Miranda's slanted glance. And then he added, and to himself too, "You right, of course." All who witnessed the scene realized that Stephen had lost his head for Camille. Camille realized it too. The only thing left to do was to wait for their chance encounter and act. The girl noticed that Stephen left the farm at the same time every day and set it up so that she too left work at the same hour, having asked the management in advance. Before going out, she disbanded her hair and changed into dresses favorably emphasizing the curves of her figure. Then, it was just a matter of waiting. "Camille, good afternoon." "You look beautiful," said Stephen. He slowed down in front of the girl. "Oh, Stephen, I didn't notice you." Camille was playing the scene. "Such a surprise. It's good to see you. How have you been?" "I've been good. And when you met a girl like that, it was great not to let you down, asked the businesswoman. I'd be very grateful to you. I just had to get to the district center, smiled Camille. Sat in the SUV of the businessman and gracefully ogled the knee of the way the driver could not tear away from him. Look, and Camille thought you were all the way there. I'd invite you out, but I'm afraid there's nowhere to go, and rumors might creep in, said Stephen in the district center. Oh yes, there's nowhere to go in the countryside, you're right, Camille said sadly. It's like in the city. I agree with you. In fact, I'm going there this weekend. Perhaps you could keep me company, the businessman asked politely. Camille clapped her hands with pleasure. Great. Then I'll pick you up. Where do you live? Asked Stephen. Better not by the house. How about by the stadium? Asked the girl. Deal. Stephen said cheerfully. The man and the girl said goodbye. Camille went to the lingerie store. She clearly needed a new seductive set. The next day at work, she was called up by Miranda. Camille, this is none of my business. But did you seriously think you'd be making love to the petty officer? He's a married man. Come on, think of yourself. He'll play around and then he'll quit. And then you'll be heartbroken and swallow tears. That's how it works. The girl tried to talk sense into the boss. I've already broken all the tears. I don't pay for men anymore. Thank you for your advice, Miranda, but I'll take care of it myself. Camille replied cheekily and went back to her workplace. Fire girl. The boss shouted after her. The weekend came. Camille told her parents that she was going to visit John and John, that she would stay at her parents' house, and she went to the city with Stephen. On the way, they immediately switched to you and began to flirt openly. In the city, the businessman took the girl to a restaurant. They ended the evening at his apartment. Isn't the wife coming in? Asked Camille from passionately kissing her neck Stephen. No, she doesn't know about this apartment, breathing, said the man. Oh, you mean? Playfully said Camille, and led him towards the bedroom. The whole next day they did not live in bed. Toward evening, the entrepreneur took his young girlfriend shopping and then drove her to his Barton. On the way, Camille sadly told him how hard it was for her to work, how tired she was, and that she deserved more. Did you know that your internship ends tomorrow? Are you really a doll and not a milkmaid? Will you go to live in the apartment where we were today? Asked Stephen. Camille let out a tear of joy to make sure. Of course, I would do anything to be closer to you. Thank you, you're my hero, said the milkmaid. Barnett kept his word, and the very next day agreed with Miranda that Camille would no longer go to the farm. She'd be suspended from her apprenticeship. She's 20 years old, and she's already spinning men like a smitten bitch, her co-worker said to the woman. Miranda just shook her head and said, Let's go to work. I'm not used to this kind of life. I'm used to carrying everything on my own back and not waiting for handouts from anyone. But my conscience does not bother me and I sleep well, she explained to her friend. Meanwhile, Camille had two things to settle: to break with John and to inform her parents about her move to the city. The first item was not a problem for the girl, although she felt a little sorry for the former roommate because he sincerely loved her. You're very good, John, aren't you? But you and I are completely different. Believe me, it's better for both of us, the girl said tenderly at that moment. Feeling guilty, John did not hold back his emotions and cried. I can't hold you, but I will always love you, he said, and covered his face with his hands. Camille kissed him on the top of his head, gathered the rest of his belongings from the house and left. The conversation with her parents promised to be more difficult. The girl knew that in their eyes John was the ideal candidate for her husband. They did not trust men of Stephen's level. Nevertheless, Camille firmly decided that she would no longer allow herself to be manipulated and decide for herself. Mom, Dad, I'm going to live in the city, she announced firmly to her family. So people were telling the truth, and I thought they were spreading rumors. Cheers. Nancy wailed. Wait, Mother. Father entered the conversation. And where are you pouring out to us? What other town? Don't they sleep with him? Camille answered proudly, although her knees were shaking at that moment. Yes, Mother, you're right. We have not raised an honest man but a rich man's doormat, said Christopher. So, you're not going anywhere. You're staying here. You won't go out again until you think. Did they give you brains? It's a beautiful life. If you want it, you want it. Cheers. I sobbed back in Camille, who were famous very early. I'm not going to be a milkmaid like you. And Barnett? He's in love with me. Today with you, tomorrow with someone else. He'll change you like a glove. Is that what you want? In fact, he's in love. What about you? Do you feel anything for him? Christopher went on. Yeah, that's what I want. I want to live a normal life for a little while. And about love, I don't believe in it anymore. I don't want to love myself. Camille's screaming was too painful. Sweetheart, darling, you've got it all ahead of you. John, he's so good. The mother wailed. I don't want to have porridge with Stephen. And you're not the boss of me, Camille said and ran out of the house with her suitcase. On the street, she turned around and saw in the window the sad and disappointed eyes of her father. He did not run out and hold his daughter by force, but this look hurt the girl even more. However, Stephen was already waiting for her outside the stadium in his big car. How did it go? He asked and kissed her. It was fine, answered Camille, who managed to hide the traces of tears. They promised a little, but they let her go. What's in it for them? Of course, my love, to the restaurant. Stephen called back and added Gaza. Camille laughed in response, though a cat squeaked in her soul. The businessman really put her in a secret apartment and bought there everything that the girl herself wanted. In the dwelling appeared a treadmill, a large closet, a pile of new clothes and cosmetics. Camille felt like a fairy tale princess. Stephen did not visit her every day. After all, he was a married man. This fact did not embarrass the girl. She did not claim his hand. She was quite satisfied with the bohemian life she led now. The man was reluctant to talk about his family. And yet Camille was concerned about the question. Kotika, how is your wife? Don't you love her at all? She asked the businessman while giving him a massage. I don't love the stutterer. She's a good woman, but there were never any feelings between us. I don't hide the fact that I married her because of my father-in-law's rich father. He's still alive to this day. Tough guy Jack. Actually, he owns the whole network of farms in the south of Russia, and I'm his deputy. That's why my wife and I don't divorce. Everyone understands, but we've long since gotten used to it. I do not bring women into our apartment, make my wife gifts, behave with her politely and courteously. She responds to me in the same way. That's all, Stephen explained. Do you have children? Camille asked. A son? But he's all grown up. Studying abroad without much love, said the businessman. I wonder what he's studying for, asked the girl, a programmer. He's been interested in computers since childhood. But that's it. I propose to close this topic. Besides, we have more interesting things to do, answered Stephen and kissed Camille. She didn't resist. At the beginning of autumn, the girl realized that she was pregnant. It came as a complete surprise to her. She did not plan to keep Stephen in this way and was afraid that he would leave her after learning about the baby. But no, Stephen turned out to be even glad. That's great. I love children. Besides, I had my eldest son when I was very young and busy with my career, so I didn't have time for him. He was raised by his mother. That's why my relationship with him was strained. It was like we were strangers. But now I've matured into conscious parenthood, and I'd love to take care of my son. We're having a son. You don't know yet? Asked the entrepreneur. Son, that's right, answered Camille. The due date was coming up. Well, that's good. We'll name him after my father, Robert. But I can't marry you, you know. But it's all such a formality, especially nowadays. I won't leave you. I'll take care of all the expenses. I'll visit you here regularly. So, Kitty, everything will be fine. Have a happy baby, Stephen reassured her. Camille exhaled and began to enjoy motherhood. She abandoned her studies at the technical college while she waited for the baby. She enrolled in a manicure course. She decided to fulfill her teenage dream. Stephen paid for the class. The man did not deceive and in everything supported the passion throughout the pregnancy, so the word flowed very easily. Camille thought for a long time whether to tell her parents about it or not. In the end, she decided and called her father. But you have someone to look after you. What do you want from us? The father said brutally. Nothing, answered Camille and hung up the phone and cried. At the end of March, the girl gave birth to a strong boy weighing 5 kilograms. A real big boy, said the nurse, handing the baby to the father. He was radiant with joy and pride. Camille was happy too, although she would have liked her mother to be with her on such an important day. But it turned out as it did. The girl had long ago accustomed herself to be guided by circumstances. Stephen took the beloved newborn Robert to the apartment, covered with flowers and blue balloons. The parents had thoughtfully bought all the necessary things: stroller, crib, diapers. Beforehand, Camille was a little frightened by the new status. Besides, she had no one to consult with. Stephen spent a lot of time with his lawful wife, but she had no choice. I had to adapt and get used to it. Nowadays, you can find a lot of necessary information on the internet. The girl did not get any incredible pleasure from motherhood. All the same, she gave birth to a child early, did not walk in her, and properly not enjoying her youth. Nevertheless, it was quite interesting for her to take care of little Robert. Fortunately, he turned out to be a quiet and obedient boy. He ate and slept, and rarely cried out. His health was great. Camille did not worry about finances. Stephen provided for them completely. The only thing is that there are girls who grew up in nature. It was stuffy in the village. It's in a stone jungle. If earlier she was more mobile and could go out, now it was problematic to do it with a small child. The girl voiced her worries to the child's father. "What's the problem?" "I have a country house. Let me take you and Robert there for the summer," said Stephen. "And your wife will not come there?" Camille asked cautiously. With the baby, she had become more vulnerable and more wary of such things. "No, she's going to the sea for the summer. Our latitudes don't appeal to her." "So don't worry," Stephen said and hugged his beloved. A week later, the man took Camille and little Robert to his luxurious suburban mansion. "Well, are you alive? Here's space, silence, and fresh air, all you need for happiness," said the businessman. "But we Sviatenko for complete happiness need you too, to sweeten your anger towards him." "Camille, my baby, I will come to visit you on weekends, Stephen answered her. "Honey, but your wife's going to the seaside. What prevents you from visiting us more often?" The young mother asked her nomadic son. "You know very well that I have a lot of work," Stephen said in a steely tone that did not tolerate any objections. Camille wisely did not contradict him, but she wondered whether she was his only lover. Even before she was pregnant, and in the early stages of her pregnancy, she was sure Stephen had no one else. But as her belly began to grow, she had her doubts. The man was still funding Camille, but meetings with her became more infrequent. The girl was not so much jealous, because she had never really loved Stephen, as she was afraid for her future and the future of her son. Whereas before, the thought of being alone had not frightened her. She was young, beautiful, free, but now there was cause for concern. After childbirth, her figure had blurred a little, and the presence of a child made her less mobile, less attractive in the eyes of other men. In addition, on the heels of stepped-on even younger competitors, therefore Camille had to keep her ear to the ground, but at the same time do not put a lot of pressure on the man, so that he did not run away first or did not put her and her son on the street. And knowing Stephen's fiery temperament, such a thing was quite possible. Gradually, Camille was getting used to the role of a mother and her young rural lifestyle, but in complete comfort. Everything was quite all right. But the girl was still troubled by the lack of communication with her parents. She understood that her father was strongly opposed to communication with his daughter, but there was still the mother. Nancy, though not particularly sentimental, still loved her daughter. Camille wrote to her mother and invited her to visit. At her own risk, the woman lied to her husband that she was going to visit her sister for a week. She arrived at her daughter's house. Seeing the little grandchild, she cried and handed him modest gifts: 2 rattles, a suit for growing up, and plush dogs. "Oh, of course, with your luxuries. With yours, my gifts are of no use to you." In embarrassment, looking at the mansion, said Nancy. "Mother, what are you saying? You've brought wonderful gifts. Thank you for them," Camille said and hugged her mother. She knew that even this modest set had cost the woman with the letter carrier's small salary a lot of money. This was the happiest week for Camille in the last year. Nancy was happy to be away from her grandson and to help her daughter with everything. She exhaled. The house was idyllic. The daughter settled in. "Of course you're well, I can't tell you. It's expensive, it's rich. Robert has everything. I see that Stephen doesn't hurt you, or you're invisible. That's good, but I see that your heart is not in the right place. You don't like Stephen, do you?" Mother asked. Do you? Without even trying to lie, Camille replied. So what's the point of all this? Your eyes aren't burning. Why did you rush into it when you were having an affair with him? You're so young and beautiful. I understand I wanted a beautiful life. But you could have found it, even if it wasn't as luxurious, but with a man you love. Maybe you should have waited a little longer and not shown me. Norov? Nancy asked affectionately. Camille cried and for a long time did not answer. But then she calmed down and said, "You know, Mother, I've become like that out of resentment toward Molly. I really loved him then, with all my soul. And he left me, since he didn't come twice. Probably decided not to get involved with a country girl. So I decided that I'll show all the men what this country girl is. And so I did. Of course, the way I am now, it's a mask. But I'm used to it. It's quite comfortable. It's a little tight in places, of course, and overbearing. But the pluses still outweigh it. And Stephen, though I don't like it, I feel good about it. And after all, he's my father, my baby." Camille shared her feelings frankly. Nancy just sighed and hugged her daughter and kissed her on the top of her head. "Father, even though your heart is still on it, he still loves you and is worried about it." "I know that," she said, "and for Koshelev." "Mother, what's the matter with you?" Camille asked, frightened. "It's nothing, my dear. Something's wrong with my lungs," the mother replied. "Let's go to the doctor tomorrow," suggested the daughter. "No, honey, I have to go home. We've got cucumbers. We have to close the jars." "I'll go to the doctor at my place," said Nancy and went to bed. The next day she left. The aimlessly lonely days dragged on again for Camille. Out of boredom, she continued to watch instructional videos on the monitor, hoping that someday she would open her own salon. Stephen had even mentioned that when Robert grew up, he would give her some money for it. August had replaced July. The days were getting shorter, the nights longer. The air was beginning to smell. In the fall, Stephen began to come less and less often. During one of his visits, Camille noticed lipstick marks on the collar of his shirt and was finally convinced that the man had a mistress. So what if he cheated on his wife? Who said he wouldn't cheat on his mistress? Camille thought with a little sadness. But she pretended not to notice. Her life at the mansion was monotonous. There were no guests except Stephen's mother until one day at the very end of summer. Camille was cooking in the kitchen. Robert sat nearby in a high chair and shook a rattle given by his grandmother. The door to the house was open. The girl was used to the fact that the cottage community was always quiet and there was no one to be afraid of. However, suddenly she heard some noise in the yard, went to the window, and saw a male silhouette. Frightened that it was a thief who had entered their plot, Camille grabbed Robert and ran with him into the pantry. The thief took cautious steps into the house. The girl watched him through a slit and prayed that her son would not cry and give them away. The man's face was hard to see behind the hood, but he appeared to be young, or more likely it was a boy. The young man slowly made his way down the hallway, walked into the kitchen and saw food on the stove. "Hey, is anyone here?" shouted the guy loudly. Camille froze. She knew that voice very well. At that moment, Robert cried loudly. The young man went to scream and cautiously opened the door to the pantry. Camille, clutching her son to her chest, she knew who she would see, but she was still surprised by Molly. "Emile." The boy was equally confused. "What are you doing there?" Both of them blurted out with glee. "I live here, first." Camille reacted. "That's fine, but why do you live in my house?" asked Molly. "What do you mean?" "In yours," Camille's eyes rounded. "More precisely, in my family's house," the boy explained. "So Stephen is your father?" The girl marveled. "If you mean Stephen Wagpet, he is my father, and I am his only son," Molly replied. "Not the only one anymore." Camille answered and looked at Robert lying in her arms. "This baby is my father's son?" The boy was surprised. Camille nodded silently. "And you, moonlighting is what?" "Babysitting?" asked Molly. "No." Camille hesitated and continued after a pause. "I'm the mother of this boy. His name is Robert, by the way." Molly clutched his head. "This is surreal. I think I'm dreaming," he said. "No, you're not, unfortunately," replied Camille. "Okay, I'm going to get some air and then I'll come back and you can tell me all about it," Molly said and went out into the garden. Camille saw the guy smoking. He came back 15 minutes later with Doroshenko and Restless. Right. But I'm waiting for your explanations, he said. Camille detailed to the former lover the history of relations with his father. Molly listened attentively to the girl and did not interrupt her. Now Robert and I have been living in this house for 3 months. That's the story. Finished the girl. I'll be right back, said Molly and went out for a smoke again. When he came back, Camille asked him, "What are you doing here?" "Stephen told me you were studying abroad." "I am." At least he didn't lie about that. "You're a bad liar," Molly said angrily. "But now I'm on a mini vacation in the city. I'm bored. I decided to come to the house for a couple of days to breathe in the nature. Why no girlfriend?" I cautiously decided to inquire about Camille's ex-lover's situation. "What girl?" "I don't have one. I'm lonely," Molly said. And after a while he continued to be honest. "I haven't had anyone since you, as a matter of fact. I went out with girls a couple of times, but I quickly realized it wasn't for me. And not to mess with Ksenia's head, I could have forgotten you. So why then in your time you did not come to the village?" With resentment asked Camille. "I couldn't, could I? I was 17. I hadn't got my license yet, and it was very inconvenient to get to you by train. And my father wouldn't let me go. And then the Olympics in China. I won it, which is why I'm studying in China now. I wanted to come visit you when I got back. I turned 18 in March. I thought I'd get my license and fly straight to you. But I didn't. You turned out to be a hot girl and didn't even want to listen to me. So now we have what we have. So you're my little brother's mother?" Interesting story, of course, summarized with a sad smile, Molly. "Why do you and your father have different last names? He's Barnett and you're Otis. I never even realized you two were related." Camille voiced the question that came to mind. "Because I despise him," Molly replied sharply. "Even my mom didn't take his last name. She kept hers from her grandfather. So I followed in his footsteps." "It's simple. It's clear," Camille said bitterly. "The matter is clear. That the matter is dark," replied Molly. "All right, I'll get out of your way. I'm going back. Why don't you stay? As far as I understand, you did not come to the raid by car. The trains are bad. How will you get back?" Camille asked. "I wouldn't want to stay here for obvious reasons, but there's logic in what you say. It would be difficult for me to get to the city now, so I think I'll stay. But I won't bother you. I'll take the upstairs guest room and sit there quietly until morning, and then I'll leave on the first train," Molly explained. "Good." Camille was genuinely pleased. She put Robert to bed and knocked on the guest's room. "Why don't we go sit in the garden gazebo? You've come to get some fresh air, haven't you?" Camille invited him in. "What about your son?" Molly asked. "He's already asleep," the girl replied. The guy silently got out of bed and followed Camille. The girl played tea from the herbs she had gathered during the summer in the local meadow and brought jam from cherries, which she had twisted together with her mother. At first Camille thought that they would not be able to find a common language with Molly, as they had both changed over the years. But in the end, the conversation went smoothly, just as it had 4 years ago. The girl's heart lit up and revitalized. She was both pleased and frightened by this forgotten feeling. She noticed that it felt good in Molly. The stars already showed in the sky, and the guy and the girl kept talking in plaid. "I guess we should go," Camille said, realizing that she was too cold. "As sad as it is, you are right," Molly replied. The young people walked slowly towards the house. At the threshold, the boy stopped and pointed to the sky. "Remember how that summer we liked to look at the stars, to look for falling stars, to make wishes?" Molly asked dreamily. "Of course I remember," answered Camille sadly. "Did yours come true?" asked the boy. Camille lowered her eyes and shrugged. "Mine didn't. Actually, I had only one wish to be with you," said Molly sadly. At that moment, Camille looked up and kissed Molly. Then she pushed him away. "Silly me, what am I doing? We're not allowed." She said it by ear. "You're right." Molly echoed her, cheeks flushed. "And yet." The boy held Camille tightly and kissed her passionately. That night they spent together. Camille had never experienced such bliss. She remembered everything she had dreamed of in her youth and came back to her real self. She woke up at dawn, but Molly was no longer in the house. On the table she found a note from him: "Goodbye, the main love of my life." I don't want to stop you from building your life. It's the path you've chosen. Good luck to you. Take care of my little brother, the message said. Camille cried, but quickly got her senses in order because it was time to feed little Robert. Molly was right. It was too late to replay everything already, as if sensing something amiss. A couple days later, Stephen arrived at the cottage. Camille was afraid that Molly had told him everything, but with the help of leading questions, she learned that the man knew nothing. Stephen was unaccustomedly silent and not affectionate. "Oh, honey, I think we should cut back a little bit. You're just staying home for now anyway. You don't need so many outfits for shopping. I'll give you less. Oh, and remember, I promised you a new cell phone. I read the reviews. This model is even worse than the last one you have now. So we'll postpone that purchase too," the man said, "as you see fit." "Dear," Camille replied. She was not frightened by the prospect of being without new shoes, gadgets. But the very tone of the conversation and the fact that Stephen had started to save money on her made her think that he had probably started to spend more money on his mistress. The man left that afternoon, leaving Camille alone with her young son, and the reflection did not leave Molly's mind. Maybe he was right, and it was not necessary then to get hot and so hastily break off relations with him. But history, as we know, has no subjunctive mood. She carried the pillow from the guest bedroom into her room, laid it beside her, and sighed with delight. The smell of Molly was still lingering. A week later, however, the boy unexpectedly came to the cottage again. "Camille, you can't go on like this. I love you and I can't live without you. We've already wasted so many years because of stupidity. But I don't intend to waste another day. Will you agree to move in with me? Yes, I'm not as rich as my father, but I'm already working part-time at this firm with a good income. I'm sure it'll be even better in the future. How do you see it?" he asked. "But what about it?" "Robert?" Camille asked, confused. "We'll take him with us. I'll raise him. Maybe in the future we will tell him the whole truth. Maybe not," Molly explained. "Where will we live?" "You're studying abroad, aren't you?" Camille asked. "Just this week I was looking into it, and I found out that I could transfer to a distance learning program. I don't have much time left. As long as we live in my apartment, Grandpa bought it for me when I was a kid. And then when I've got my degree and Robert's grown up, I think we'll move to the US and make a real life for ourselves. Wouldn't you agree?" With hope in his voice, said the boy. "It's very tempting, but how will I explain everything to Stephen?" Camille continued to ask important questions. "You just tell him that you've met someone else and go to him. What this other man is, I don't have to say. If he wants to, let him see Robert in this speech. But I suppose he could just pay you off, give you money for your son, and let you go. I overheard my mom talking to her friends, and I know from them that this situation has happened before. I already have a half-brother or sister growing up somewhere, but my dad doesn't see him, he just sends money. Payoffs. Also, I'm sorry if I'm going to hurt you now. But this week I happened to see my father in a restaurant in the company of a long-legged girl who looks to be your age, maybe even younger. So make up your mind, but don't hesitate," Molly finished his speech. "Yes, I knew he was having an affair, hiding his mistress from his mistress. That's absurd. How did I get into all this?" Camille said sadly. "Exactly. So what do you agree?" Molly asked. "Yes, I do. I want to be with you. Stephen will be here on Wednesday. I'll tell him everything. We'll see how he reacts," said the girl. "Okay, I have to be in town to take care of some schoolwork. Write down my new number. And if anything happens, call me right away. Okay?" asked Molly. "Okay," answered Camille and pressed herself against her lover. "Don't be afraid. Everything will work out. Love will win," the guy encouraged her. Stephen really came to the mansion on Wednesday without gifts, although he had never come empty-handed before. The man and the girl sat down to dinner. Camille tried her best to pretend that this was their usual meeting. Although inside, in anticipation of a difficult conversation, she was trembling. She even wanted to give up the idea, but in the end she plucked up courage and told Stephen what she had promised Molly, without mentioning his name. The man was furious. "How dare you, you ungrateful mutt? I picked you up a village fool. I made a man out of you. I didn't send you away with a potbelly, and you're looking left and right. Do you want to go? Don't even think about it." Sit still and don't even think about getting involved, you understand me?" The man shouted. Camille had never seen him like this before. She didn't expect such a reaction. The girl nodded silently, apologized, and said that she had done something stupid. "What did you do?" "Packed up and went to the car. I have to go into town. I have an important meeting tomorrow. You get your thoughts together and think about your behavior. I'll come back on Friday to check on you." Camille nodded silently, though she felt anger boiling in her chest. Her dignity was hurt. She wasn't about to become someone's slave. She called Molly and told him everything. He told her to pack her things. That same night, he came and took Camille and her son. They didn't take anything extra, no expensive gifts from Stephen, just the basic, necessary things. Molly had thoughtfully pulled a balaclava over his head. There were cameras in the yard. He could be tracked through the footage. The guy brought Camille and her brother to his apartment. It was not as luxurious as Stephen's place, but very cozy, modern. "This is where we're gonna live. Can you exhale?" Molly hugged the girl. "Will your father not get to us?" Camille asked fearfully. "Don't worry. He doesn't know about this apartment. Grandfather kept the deal a secret. I'll say I'm staying with a friend who's in China, and I'll keep an eye on his place. I won't give you the address. Let me ask him." "He won't. They said I'm bored in China and I'm going back home. That's all. True, you'll have to be kept secret from your family for the time being. But as you know, we're not very close. I live on my own, and then we'll move to the States, and no one will bother us there." Molly laid it all out convincingly. The plan seemed viable to Camille, and she began to settle in. For the first few months, she flinched at every rustle and sound, fearing that Stephen was breaking into the apartment. But then she calmed down and realized that the danger was over. Life was gradually getting better. The young people spent a lot of time together. Stephen studied remotely. Camille sat with the child and managed the household. Both were at-home neighbors, so there was harmony in their couple. The guy didn't lie with the fact that his family cared little about how and with whom he lived. His parents stayed out of his life in peace and harmony. A whole year had passed. Camille could not believe her happiness and kept waiting for a catch. But Molly reassured her and said that everything would be fine. "Already in the spring I will get my diplomas, we will leave and we will definitely get married," he told her. Camille relaxed and, as it turned out, for nothing. One day she took Sveta for a walk. Molly was in China at the time. He went there to solve some study issues that arose. Returning home, the girl noticed that the door to the apartment was open. At first she wanted not to go in, to call the police, but then I don't know why, she opened the door and heard Stephen's voice. He was on the phone. "Yes, Kitty, I found a new nest for us. It's my son's apartment. I only found out yesterday by accident. No, my son doesn't live here. He's staying at a friend's apartment. Don't ask me why he's weird. So I think I'll bring you here tomorrow and we'll spend Holy Night together for at least a year. That's weird. There's some stuff in here, and it's baby stuff. Where did they come from?" "Okay, baby, I'll call you back," said Stephen to his mistress and hung up. At that moment, Robert cried. The man heard it and ran into the hallway, where Camille and her son were standing. The girl rushed to the door, but Stephen was ahead of her. He locked the door and hid the key. "How did you get in here?" "The bastard!" screamed the man. "Me? I was just confused. Though wild to think, my son wasn't as simple as I thought. Aren't you the country love he killed the whole 11th grade for and couldn't forget for a long time? Isn't he the love you ran away from me in shame a year ago?" "The puzzle is complete, baby," Stephen said, and took Camille by the chin. "Don't you dare touch me and call me that." The girl screamed and threw the man's hand away. "What are you talking about?" "I'll behave the way I want to behave." "I see what you mean. And who is that in your hands? Isn't that my heir to the check? Don't cry, baby. I'll take you away from your negligent mother and raise you to be a decent man. Not like your lazy big brother who was afraid to come out in the open." Having said that, Stephen literally ripped the boy out of his mother's arms, despite his screaming. "I will call the police," Camille threatened. "And what are you going to say? That your son was taken by his legal father, a respected businessman with wealth. Do I have to take away your parental rights? You probably don't work anywhere like that. You're not used to it. And you have no education. Stephen said with a smile. "You won't get in," said the girl. "They'll laugh at you." Stephen laughed in her face and then continued. "So you have two options. The first, I take away your phone, you delete all accounts in social networks and leave with me, my son. And no more tricks with Molly or anyone else. The other, I take my son, terminate your parental rights, and you never see him again. It's your choice. Why would you do that? You've got tons of women. Leave us alone." Camille begged. "This is a matter of principle, baby. No one had ever humiliated Stephen Wagpet like that. And for that," the man said. Camille cried and fell to her knees. "Stop believing. Time, money. I'm waiting for your decision." Stephen rushed her. "First, I choose the first option," Camille said in a trembling voice. "Good girl. I always knew you were a good girl. Give me the phones. Don't even think about messing with Molly. He's a tough guy. He'll get over it. He's going to leave the country soon anyway. He'll find some American girl and forget you," Stephen said and led Camille away. He took her and her son to some country house she didn't know the address of. Camille paced like a wounded cat, imagining that Molly would take her departure as a betrayal. She struggled to find a phone somewhere, to call him and explain. But she feared she might lose her son if she did. Her face was constantly swollen with tears. The girl sat on sedatives. A few weeks later, Stephen arrived at the house. "I made you, Robert, passports. Pack up, we're leaving," he commanded. "Where to?" Camille asked fearfully. "Don't worry, you'll like it." "I can't wish my son bad things," Stephen said. The girl obediently packed her bags and set off. On the way to the airport, she literally photographed the scenery, fearing that she may never return to her homeland. But she had her son with her, and that was the most important thing. Stephen took Camille and Robert to Cyprus. "The sea air would be good for my air," the man said. He put his mistress and son in a small villa in a small village on the Mediterranean coast. It was inland, but beautiful in nature and with every comfort. "Sonora, how generous is your husband. You are very lucky," the maid said cheerfully as she greeted her. Camille made no reply. Soon Stephen flew away, promising to visit every month. "I forgot the most important thing. I am taking your passports with me, so be smart," he said goodbye to Camille. The girl fell into a real depression. She found herself isolated from her native places and people, and most importantly from the man she loved, who probably considered her a coward, traitor, who ran away from him without explanation. But time, as we know, heals even the deepest wounds. Robert grew up and made his mother happy. He began to speak. Camille took an active part in the boys' development. They took long walks, swam in the sea, learned languages together. They got a dog, Charlie. He was a lot more fun. Stephen, as promised, first visited the villa once a week, but then his visits became more and more rare. The man had gotten his way, planted a tuck, a golden cage, and made sure it would not fly away again. Finally satisfied that Camille was not going anywhere from him, he calmed down. Meanwhile, on one of his visits, Stephen announced in a steady voice that Camille's mother had died of lung cancer. "I need to go to her funeral." The girl pleaded. "She's already been buried." The man said indifferently. "Just to the grave, then. Let me go for 2 days. I swear I'm not running anywhere," screamed Camille. "Well, you're a book, so I'm not letting you go anywhere. Besides, the man's gone. A grave is just a mound. Just remembering her. That'll be enough," Stephen said. To distract herself and escape from the cruel reality, the girl took up painting. She watched lessons on the internet, improving her skills. But she had an innate talent, and that was the most important thing. For a year, the girl painted exclusively for herself. But then she came up with the idea to try to sell her art so that her husband in no way facilitated her. Camille started a fake account, focused exclusively on the Western public. She herself had noticeably tightened up her English as well. She gave herself the pseudonym No One, and tried to exhibit her paintings, made according to all the canons of modern art. It took her another year to get them recognized in the West. Meanwhile, Stephen had no idea. Camille befriended the house servants and talked them into not giving away her passion to her patron. Works of certain copies began to sell actively and for a good price. Camille agreed with the maid that the money would come into her accounts, will withdraw them and give them to the artist, and keep the interest. Robert was already 3.5 years old. He understood that his mother was a famous artist and was very proud. Her paintings were sent to different countries by mail. Nika did not reveal her face. The public only knew that she lived in Cyprus. Usually, this delivery option satisfied all her clients. But suddenly, there was an American who insisted on meeting the artist in person and shaking her hand for her talent. It was the gallery owner Justin Bloom, famous in his country. Camille had read a lot about him and longed to meet him, but was still wary of revealing his identity. "You have nothing to fear, Signora," the maid reassured her. "Signora Stephen had been here only recently, so we can't expect him anytime soon. Make your appointments for next week. And let this American mister come to visit us." Camille agreed to this and informed the gallerist that she was ready to receive him. The waiting time was exciting. On the appointed day, the doorbell rang at the mansion. Camille was waiting for her guest in her studio on the second floor. The maid came up to her first. "Mr. has arrived with a friend, also an art connoisseur. Would you mind if he also came up to the studio to admire your paintings?" she asked. "Let the brave one go up," Camille replied. She heard footsteps on the stairs and her heart raced. For 2 years she had led a reclusive life, and here was such a meeting. But even more strongly her heart began to exude when she saw the guests on the threshold of the studio. Standing next to the gallerists was none other than her beloved Molly. Camille, the dialogue of 2 years ago at the Stephen Mansion in Russia was repeated. "My Grebe. Allow me to introduce, this is my friend Molly Otis. He is Russian, but as far as I understand you know each other, and as far as I understand, you are also Russian," the gallerist asked in astonishment. "That's right," Camille answered him in English. "It's not my Cypriot pseudonym. In fact, my name is Camille, and I am from Russia." "And how did you end up here?" Molly asked in amazement. "Mr. Bloom, may I leave you alone in my studio for a while?" "Mr. Otis and I have something to discuss," said Camille. "Of course, I've studied your masterpieces so far," replied the gallerist. Camille and Molly went into the next room. "Are you sure we have something to talk about?" Molly asked her with resentment in her voice. "Absolutely. Just after listening to me," Camille replied and told him the whole story. "You're not lying?" After listening to her, Molly asked, "Why would I lie to you? I want you to take it away. Change over here." Camille almost shouted. "You live in America now, right?" "Quite right," answered Molly. "So I'll think of something. I don't want to be your father's niece anymore. The only thing keeping me from throwing myself out the window is my son," tearfully begged her lover. "Don't worry, we'll think of something. My father, of course, a bad man, but I could not even imagine that he is capable of such meanness," said Molly. "The main problem is that you and Robert don't have passports. Am I understanding this correctly?" "Yes," said Camille. "We'll work it out. Justin is a very powerful man. He's got connections in all sorts of areas, including some not so legal, shall we say. I'll leave you my phone number and I'll call you tonight and tell you how we'll proceed." "I won't lose you again," Molly said and hugged his lover. They then returned to the gallery so that the servants would not suspect anything untoward and made small talk on the subject of painting. Mr. Bloom bought several works by a certain Corbett, and the guests left the mansion that same evening. Molly called the number left at Camille's house and said Justin would help make fake passports for her. "And Robert, think of a new name," her lover told her. "Nancy in honor of Mom," with tears in her voice said Camille. "Okay, you'll be Nancy Canada. Cypriot Kai, I will think of something for Robert now too. We will have to wait a few days or maybe weeks. When it's ready, I'll let you know. For security reasons, we will not be in contact for the time being." "I love you," Molly said. "I love you too," whispered Camille. Molly called a week later. Passports were ready. Tickets were bought to lure the girl and the boy out of the house. Justin had to be involved again. Mr. Bloom had charmed all the servants and gained their trust. So when he asked the landlady to give him a tour of Cyprus, no one had any questions. Camille was going to leave the house light. If she had brought a suitcase with her, there would have been too many questions. She took only a plush dog, which she gave to her mother's grandson a few years ago. As a result, Camille and her son, accompanied by the gallery owner, left the mansion, promising to return in a couple of hours. The maid, with whom she had made friends, as if she understood everything and crossed Camille in farewell. The latter nodded gratefully back at her. At the airport, she met Molly and collapsed into his arms. 12 o'clock later, they landed in New York. "Welcome to your new life, MS. In Nancy, Canada." And I deviated. Mr. Bloom said goodbye and left Camille, Robert and Molly behind. "I am excited, but very happy," said the girl. "It will be all right," replied the man. "I have absolutely no stuff." "There's so much shopping to do," said Camille. "It's nothing. We'll get everything we need. The important thing is that we're together." "I told you that love will conquer everything." Molly winked and took Robert in his arms. Camille clung to her favorite boys and cried, for the first time in a long time, from happiness. Now she was a free bird, and she knew that no one would ever restrict her freedom again.